Hi, everyone. So Dr. Betty Yu is a professor in the Department of Speech, Language, and Hearing Sciences and at San Francisco State University. And she's also the managing co-editor of the Journal of Critical Study of Communication and Disability. Her research and clinical interests are all the factors that can influence communication access for multilingual disabled children. Dr. Yu's kind of my personal hero because I sort of kind of met you during a couple years ago and through the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Speech, Language, and Hearing Caucus. So you're a huge advocate for helping families learn about their heritage language and their child's language development with their in terms of their using their heritage language, like their home language, and also as just like a huge advocate for the community in general within our field. So we're very excited to have you this week or this month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And just so people have the context, there are only 2% of speech language therapists in all of the United States are of Asian Pacific Islander heritage. And then a smaller slice of that population can speak the home languages of our clients. And so we do have a very tight community and we look out for each other because there's so few of us. So yeah, if any of you are interested into going into the field or want to encourage your children to go into a good career, we really need more people in the profession. And so today I was asked to talk about multilingualism and bilingualism, especially for children who have disabilities and communication disabilities in particular. So I'm going to share my screen and also I saw that Ariel dropped a link into the chat. There's a Dropbox link, and in there you can find these slides. I also made a handout. It's in Chinese. I don't know how many people here speak Mandarin. I can't speak Mandarin, so if you have questions, you can ask me in either English or Mandarin. If you would like me to repeat something in Mandarin, I can also do that. Again, because so often the resources that we have are not in our home languages. So I would like to offer that to you tonight if we can. I need to just plug in my computer. It's starting to run low on battery.
Thank you for making that resource because I'm going to print it out and bring it to my clinic.
Yeah, I have given it out over the years as well. So
shall we have a vote on the language?
Yeah, 要讲中文还是讲英文呢？ We don't have so many here. Maybe we could just decide.
没关系，英文、中文都可以。
好
Yeah,
那
those are okay. Yeah.
我讲英文，然后要补充什么，我再用中文，好吗？
好，谢谢。
So today I'm going to answer some questions I always get asked. And these are the ones. And the questions I'll say in both languages because I think that's helpful. So first one, if my child has a disability in learning language, if I speak more than one language, will I confuse them? Okay, that's the first one. If my child is already delayed in language development, will speaking more than one language slow things down even more? Okay, so the first question is, should we speak more than one language at all? Will it be bad? Second one is a little milder. If they're slow, even if if I feel like they can learn it, will it slow things down even more? Okay. The third one, sometimes I get asked from parents who feel very comfortable speaking to their children in 2 languages, but what they're afraid of is, okay, all of our schooling is in English, all of the therapies are in English. We want our children to learn English faster so they can benefit from school, from all their therapies. So what's the best way to get English faster? Okay. So if we stop speaking our home language, will it speed up English? And then the last one, even for families who feel like definitely we want to raise our child bilingual, but how should we do it? Should we separate the languages so they don't get confused? So I will try and answer these questions, okay? So far, so good. 要不要用中文讲一次，还是继续呢？ OK， 好。So first one， 我们小孩如果现在已经是有一些语言上的障碍，或是发展上的障碍，如果讲2种语言或是3种，像中国家庭通常是有很多，不只是一种方言，有很多地方语言的，对不对？对我们小孩子会不会 confuse？ OK， so this is actually a very easy answer. The answer is no, they do just fine. So if your child has some delays in communication development, it will happen across languages. Speaking more than one will not make it any more severe. It will not slow down the timeline. And in 2000, let's see, when did I start? In 2004, when I started my PhD program, there was very little research on this. So that's what I want to do research on is children with communication disabilities. Can they learn more than one language? But now in 2023, I can tell you almost every study that comes out keeps finding exactly the same thing. You compare monolingual autistic children, children with specific language impairment, children who have Down syndrome, children who stutter, any of a whole variety of communication, developmental conditions that affect language development. And there's no difference in the monolingual children and bilingual children. Generally, it's about the same. And so there's no harm in speaking to your children in more than one language. And if you're interested, when I give this presentation to my students, because they need to know the research, I have a lot of research articles and listed. If you would like to read that kind of research, you can let me know. But I kind of want to just give you the bottom line, which is that we have quite a lot of evidence at this point that the general development, whether they're looking at maybe when do they say their first word, when do they start combining words into sentences, the size of vocabulary, whether they have as much social interaction, how they do on language tests, they all come out to be about the same. So that's one thing, is you should feel pretty comfortable with the research on that. And then the other thing is, well, how come the research says this, but then when in real life, I feel like the children who speak more than one language seem to be at a disadvantage. And so there's a reason for that too. If you compare two children, everything is, their life situations are the same, then you can see that the language, whether you speak one language, two languages, three, it does not seem to affect their development. But school performance is not just about development. It's also about how they test your children, what the teachers think, how they interact with your children. So one problem is that the tests that they use on our children is very biased towards English, right? So your children are getting tested in English, and then it seems like, oh, they're not testing well. Is it because we're speaking more than one language? And it's not. So this is the kind of the my rough graphic about that. So one example is like in 穿红衣服这个人 the boy in the red shirt, maybe he speaks Cantonese, okay? And then maybe this boy here in the white shirt speaks English, okay? So if you test this boy in Cantonese, maybe he has 4 words. You test this boy in English, he has 5 words. And then this girl in the middle can speak both Cantonese and English. And then you test her in Cantonese. Oh, seems like she has fewer words than the Cantonese speaking boy, only 3. You test her in English, seems like, oh, also less than this boy who has 5. But actually, because a lot of the ways we test children is only in one language, we miss the total picture. So all the children, your children who are learning more than one language, they know things across the languages, but nobody is really looking across languages. And a lot of the problem is because the teachers themselves don't know all the languages that the children know. The speech therapists don't, so they only see part of what the children can do. Yeah, so the problem is not in the children. I think we often try to fix the problem by making something different with the children, but actually we need to spend a lot more time recruiting teachers and therapists who can speak different languages, and also can assess the children fairly across the different languages. So that's the first one, is that there is no evidence that children who have a disability in learning language, that learning more than one confuses them. And also, when I say multilingual children, bilingual children, I'm also including children who are not yet speaking. So my definition of bilingual, multilingual is very generous. It means that you're in a bilingual, multilingual environment, that your life is in more than one language. I work with a lot of children who don't speak yet, but they can, they listen to a lot of languages around them, and they can understand, and that I also count that as bilingual. 所以就算不会讲话也可以，你相信吗？就算不会讲话也可以双语，就算不会讲话也可以是多种语言的小孩哈。那第二个问题就是，我小孩已经是有语言发展上的迟缓，如果学那么多语言，会不会让他更慢呢？发展上更慢。Okay, my child is already delayed in language development. Will learning more than one slow things down even more? So let's take a look at this. The research is pretty clear on that too. The bilingual children are not slower than the monolingual children in learning language. About the same when they speak their first word, or if they're not speaking, when they start using a first word. Can be through picture, can be through sign language, can be receptive, 是理解上的，就是说他可能不会讲，可是你讲他听得懂，这也算是一个字，这也算是 vocabulary，right？ The milestones， 他们发展的里碑其实是双语或是单语的小孩子都是很类似的，他们什么时候开始用单字组成句子啊 ？Making sentences come around the same time when they start interacting with other people around them around the same time. So there's no indication that they're any slower. And then here, the third question is, if I want to help my child get the most out of their education and their services, and if everything is in English, shouldn't we also speak English to help them learn English faster? Then it can help them, right? Learn. So this is interesting. Learning is about building, right? You want to build on things that you already know, and for the children as well. Like, the home language, if the foundation is solid in the home language, you want to build on that. You don't want to take that away and start from nothing, right? So think of it as building instead of competing. I think maybe sometimes the image we have in our mind is like maybe one small brain and too many things going in, and maybe they fight. So that's kind of like we think of that as like a competition model of bilingualism, and actually it doesn't work like that. When your brain is learning one thing helps you learn another thing, right? And language also works like that. So if you have vocabulary in one language, it helps you learn more words in another language. If you start understanding how words are put together in a sentence in one language, you can transfer that skill to another one. And so, for example, in one study, they separate, I think they were first grade students, 一年级的学生, Spanish speaking students. Okay, they separate the students into two groups. So two groups of Spanish speaking students, and they want to teach English vocabulary to the two groups. Okay, new English words, neither of the groups know these English words. One group, they just teach it directly in English. Okay, so they want the children to learn these, I don't know how many, but let's say 10 new English words, they directly teach in English. The other group, they teach first the meaning of the words in Spanish. Then they teach them, oh, these words in Spanish, in English is called this. The group number 2 learn faster because they can use what they already know to learn new things. So this is something that I would like to encourage you to think about your language as building on each other and supporting. It's like you're building a good structure. So this last one is so interesting because because now in 2023, right, we have a lot more information about bilingualism and multilingualism. I think more and more I'm seeing families who are more comfortable speaking their home language with their children. We're graduating a new generation of speech therapists and teachers out there who are giving better advice. I think even the doctors, like when I started the research about, 20 years ago, the doctors, teachers, the speech therapists all were saying, let's make things easy for the children. Let's speak only one language. A lot of the families were getting that advice. And so now I see change. I see that, their families are getting better advice. They're getting more encouragement to use their home language. But still people, have a lot of opinions about how to do it. Like they say, okay, don't mix the languages, maybe only Baba speak this language, Mama speak this language, or only, speak Chinese at home and only English at school or something like that. And actually, none of that is necessary. There's no research to show that one method is better than another. What's interesting is, all of this worry we have about, is our home language going to interfere with English, or our home language going to slow things down? Actually, your home language is not the problem. English will take over really fast. The one reason you might have to keep the languages, to have a time where you're only using your home language, is if your child is already maybe going to school and they only have school in English. You have to have some place where they are immersed in your home language. Your home language is the one that's vulnerable. Because once the children start school, around, even after 6 months, definitely after 1 year, they start losing the family language. It happens very fast. I think people are shocked how quickly that happens. My daughter just started kindergarten, and 2 weeks ago, we always speak Mandarin at home. And 2 weeks ago was the first time we were alone. My husband doesn't speak Mandarin. He only speaks English. And so when she and I are together, we only speak Mandarin. And for the first time, she spoke English to me. And I realized, oh, wow, it feels, I don't know, it feels so strange, but the English is coming into our home, like whether we like it or not, it's going to invade. So there are some families who keep the languages separate, not because the children get confused, but to protect the home language, because it can, if you don't make a special time for it, it can sometimes be lost quite quickly. So this is another, people worry about, if we mix language, the children will also get very confused. Like maybe you hear your children, they start the sentence in one language, they finish in another. They say, Mama, I want to eat 苹果 or something like that, right? And then you think, oh no, they're speaking, they're it's all messed up, right? But actually that's very common. If you speak more than one language, and if I'm sure everybody here who speaks more than one language, we have all done that, right? You start saying something, maybe you don't know that word, you switch over, you switch back, or for social reasons, maybe you're having a conversation in English and grandma, grandpa come in, and then you switch over for them. Maybe there are just some things that like only sound, some things are harder to say in one language than another. Like in Mandarin, we show we love each other. We don't always say it, right? So when I find myself saying things like, I love you, I do that in English. For some reason, it doesn't sound quite right in Mandarin. So there are things like that too. It's just very cultural, right? So code switching, the children can actually learn a lot by seeing you switch and use language in a very fluid way. They can learn to see, oh, when do you switch? What's a good time to do that? Maybe even it's a way to make language more interesting or more humorous, to add a little more flavor. So it's really nothing to be scared of. And the technical term for that is code switching. Code switching. So I've worked with a lot of families who, because of the advice that they're getting from a lot of people, pediatricians, teachers, sometimes speech therapists, they only speak English at home. But when I actually did a study with a family, they were so nice. They invite me to come in to record them having dinner. So I recorded them having dinner over, a few months, like 3 months. And because they say, we only speak English to my child. Okay. But I also know, like in the family, like there's grandma, grandpa, they don't speak a lot of English. And also I know that the family, they prefer to speak both, they speak Cantonese, Taiwanese, and Mandarin, right? So I was curious, what does that mean, speak only English? And so I recorded them. And do you know what speak only English means? In that family, it means when they are speaking to that child, just the child who has a disability, he has autism. So when they speak to 姐姐, his 姐姐, they use all kinds of languages. When they speak to each other, they use all kinds of languages. And then when they turn to him, they only speak English. They were correct. They only spoke English to him. And so it's he was not learning the code switching skills. He actually understood a lot of Mandarin. So just because you don't directly use a language with a child doesn't mean that they don't pick it up anyway. And so that was interesting to see. Even though nobody spoke to him in Chinese, he still learned a lot of Chinese anyway. But because he had no practice speaking, he couldn't really say it back. And oh yeah, the research, I see a question in the chat. Are these research done only on neurotypical kids? For kids on the autism spectrum, it's not clear what's causing the delay yet. Yeah. No, actually, all the research I'm talking about here are for children with disabilities. So this is a question I don't get asked very much, and I think we should, which is, what are the advantages for my child to learn for more than one language? And all the same advantages, right? Like, children without disabilities, parents spend so much money for them to learn to become bilingual, multilingual. And, in like 1950s, also, they thought learning more than one language was bad for everybody. And then since then we learned, actually, no, there are a lot of advantages. So now people are feel very positive about learning more than one language. But when it comes to children with disabilities, for some reason, we're back in 1950. We have all these doubts and we have all these worries that it's going to be bad for them. But so here are the advantages. I think we're actually just starting to research the advantages. We've been researching a long time, the whole last maybe 15, 20 years, just to make sure it's not going to be harmful. I think that shows you kind of how much fear there is around bilingualism, that we don't even dare to ask what are the advantages. We have to make sure that there's no harm first. But one of the biggest ones is, and I think especially for children with disabilities, the sense of belonging, when we think, and it's interesting when I speak with families, when children are young, maybe are new to a disability diagnosis, their priorities are different. So their priority is, I want my children to get as much therapy as possible. I want them to get the language that can allow them to speak to as many teachers and therapists as possible. So they very, very strong investment in English in the beginning. And then the same families I talk to, when their children are maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I come back to talk to them again 10 years later, 15 years later, their children are in high school, maybe they already graduated, And they say, well, now they're actually spending most of their time in the community with family. And now actually it's hard for them not to be able to speak to grandma, grandpa, not to be able to travel back to our home country and understand what people are saying. So I think maybe we need to also take a long view of what our goals are. And because, right, we talked about earlier that the languages are not in competition, we know it's important to learn English, right? But it doesn't need to come at the cost of our family language. Both can happen. And so the sense of family and community, that's a big one. The other thing that was so interesting, I spent a lot of time talking to families of children with disabilities, and especially autistic children. That's my focus. My research is focused on autism and bilingualism. And even the families who want to speak only English, when I ask them, how is it going? They say, actually, it's very hard to do. Like, when you're at home, you're talking about, there are some words that don't exist in English. You talk about 稀饭, right? How do you say that? Or, you tell some family stories. Anyway, it's also not very practical. So really what I would advise is just speak naturally. Whatever is going to help you connect, whatever is going to help your child belong and be part of whatever is happening right now. If the moment is with family, use the language that makes sense for your family. When they're outside, yeah, they probably do need to switch to English, and you can help them learn those words. But probably you're not talking about, I can't think, there's some terms that they use in school. You could help them learn that, but you're not using that at home anyway. So those two things are not conflicting, right? In our case, we had grandma speaking Cantonese for 6 months. Another grandma speak Mandarin took over because that's a length of travel visa. So only one language exists for 6 months. Do you think this may cause problems? A lot of family have situations like this. Yeah. No, that won't cause a problem. That, whatever is difficult about transitions and change will be difficult. The difficulty with, one person that your child has gotten used to not being there, and new person coming in, different way of communicating. Maybe the children do need to learn new words, right? That they had already learned how to say this in Cantonese. Now they need to learn in Mandarin. But yeah, that is a reality. I think when we live in a multilingual environment, it requires a higher language skill, to live in all of the different situations. But it will not hurt them to do that. But we need to give them time when they transition from one language environment to another. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah.
Yes, that's my question.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I keep having that question in my mind. It's because, one language they started and then there's that language does not exist anymore. So there's no more fit into it. And then eventually she'll forget. And I'm just thinking, since communication, it's the weak link that they have, and having a complicated language environment may may cause some problem.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the solution, I think it makes a lot of sense intuitively why we want to simplify, right?
Mm.
But so here's another thing. This is why I was I was interested in observing families who are choosing to use only one language. Like, does that in fact simplify things? And what I find is, because like in the family that I was talking about, where they speak only English, actually the child is still in a complex language environment anyway, because people are talking to each other in a lot of different languages, and we learn a lot from hearing and even just being bystanders in a situation. The other thing I found was that everybody's English in the family was so different, because like grandpa, when grandpa is probably, his English is the least fluent. So like when he said and they're so committed to only speaking English, to him. But like around bedtime, we had a video of them talking, and he said, tonight you want to with who sleep? Do you see what I'm saying? 今晚你要跟谁睡? Tonight you want with who sleep? So yes, he's speaking English, but that's a very different English than how mama says it, how teacher says it. I feel like at that point, you might as well speak Chinese, So like everybody in the family had very different pronunciation for different English words. The grammar is very different because their proficiency with English is so different. And so their attempt to simplify had a few side effects, I think. It kept grandpa really couldn't say too many things too, because he's afraid, right? He's afraid that he's going to make things worse. So, he used what English he has to speak with his grandson, and it's just not much. And then also, I also wonder, like how easy is the grandson to, it's almost like he does need to learn grandpa's English versus mama's English versus teacher's English. It still is quite different. So this idea of making things uniform is really not that simple. Yeah. Oh, so this idea of heritage language, we know, especially in our community, we know that the Chinese is in fact getting to be quite an asset in the world. So there's this phenomenon. Oh, I think I have a slide on this later. Yeah, maybe 20 years ago, we don't travel so much between countries, but the idea that your child's success is only in English is I don't think that's quite so true anymore. There are some cognitive advantages to bilingualism, which is very well researched for children without disabilities. And now we're starting to get some studies for children with I forget what disability profiles they have, but with language delays, with disabilities that affect language delays. And so one of the advantages is you're more flexible in your thinking. So for example, if I ask you to repeat after me, okay? Let's say, we are good children, okay? You have to repeat after me. We are
good children.
Okay, and then I say, okay, now repeat after me. Spaghetti are good children.
Spaghetti are good children.
Make no sense, right? But the children who are raised bilingual, multilingual, they have a much easier time doing that. They know language is flexible, and so they're not as stuck on things, and they also can do some some calculations that require you to ignore some things and focus only on one, they can do that faster as well. So there's some cognitive advantages that we're finding. So this is a pattern for heritage language development. I think there's another issue in here, which is at the time that the children get diagnosed with developmental disabilities, they're usually quite young. Usually happens between 2 and maybe 5. And that's also the time when they're starting school and the language loss is happening. And so in the US, usually the generation that immigrates to the US has a very strong heritage language proficiency. Generation 2, usually if they're still around the family language a lot, maybe they hear it a lot at home, they can answer you back. Oh, I'm sorry. They cannot answer you back, but they can understand. Okay. So you speak Chinese to them and they can understand, and then they answer you back in English. That's a very common pattern for generation 2. So we call that passive bilingualism, 被动式的双语能力. And then by generation 2, it's not there anymore. The family language is gone. So unless there is a very conscious investment in keeping the family language alive, it's very, very hard to keep. Usually this is what happens in our families. When children start school in the US, you will notice that the English starts taking over by the end of the first year. And then sometimes children go through a period where they will refuse to speak the home language. They only speak English. And then that happens even faster. So because many families, when they first get the diagnosis, this is when they're most eager to speak English. So I think for children with disabilities, this language loss happens even faster and than other families. And then maybe when they are 18, 20, the children try to learn the language, or the families, the children are out of school and they want more time together, and their priorities are different. Then it's you can still learn the language back, but it's easier when you have that foundation when you're younger. So I just want to emphasize, that the keeping your language is not going to hurt, and also it gets lost so fast. So when we're feeling protective of our children, I think it's worth spending the time to put our protectiveness towards their home language development, because they'll be okay. They'll be okay in terms of learning more than one language. So yeah, here are some things that are hopefully the takeaways that, even if you use whatever languages you want, use the languages you want and that you're most comfortable using with your child. You can help the children learn English or academic language no matter what language you use. So like I know one family, Baba Mama, they are not so comfortable in English, and how they help their children learn English is when the kids come home from school and they have some work, they do it together and they have the children just tell them about it in Zhongwen. And when the children have to maybe explain some things to the adults, then they can tell whether the children understand or not. And they can sort of, at the same time, they're learning the kinds of words that the children need at school, and they're learning it too. So it's almost like they're kind of learning the English together. Also, if you're very comfortable using English, you can help your child learn English and still maintain your home language. That those two things are not conflicting, and yeah, that the preservation, right, the language loss happens very quickly. So I know that we don't have too much time, maybe only 5 minutes left. If there's anything that you would like to talk about, or any questions you have, we can talk about it now. I'm also putting in my email.
Can I speak with Chinese? Can I talk with Chinese?
Yes.
可以讲中文。
可以。
OK，我今天到你这个virtual meeting basic 我真正的目的是想知道这个 language therapist， 我也想知道你的经验，因为我有个孙子，他是 autism 小孩，但是他也没有办法讲话，因为他出生的时候，他的脑子的 nerve 跟他的 brain 有 damage， 所以他想讲话的时候，他的脑子没有办法 coordinate with 他的 nerve， 所以他只能讲 one syllable， 就是说，如果我要讲love， 他只会讲 love， 或者 bird， 他只会讲 bird， 他没有办法讲 bird。我想知道有没有什么办法能够让他 correct， 能够 talk more than one syllable。因为我想你是那个 specialist，maybe 你有什么 resource 能让我去带他去做那种 language therapist， 让他能够 correctly， 因为我知道他很喜欢念书，我每次去他拿着 iPad 一直跟我讲，但是他没有办法讲出来。说 banana， 他只会讲他很讲 banana， yucky， 你喜欢 banana is yucky， delicious， 他就讲呀，他就没有办法讲出 yucky， 那我就不知道他怎么 communicate with 人家以后长大以后，因为他现在12岁嘛，所以不知道你有没有什么 resource 可以给我，然后我可以带他去做physical therapist。
好，我们那个我先给你这个我们的组织，这个是那个 Asian Pacific Islander Speech Language Hearing Caucus， 我们都是语言治疗师或是听力audiologist， 突然忘记怎么说。Anyway， 我们这个群子里面有很多语言治疗师，你如果想要找像会讲中文的语言治疗师不好找，我们算是少数的。
他不是讲中文，他爸爸是美国人，他们女儿是在美国长大的。
好，那就选择又更多了。那对不起，你们还在吗？
我叫Judy 冠。
Judy，OK，然后呢，我想要告诉你，就是说，因为其实我的 focus 是在自闭症的小孩子。那我们最近呢，学校拿到了一个这个这
5 years ago, David Teplitz
一个 grant 就是专门是在准备语言治疗师跟大部分不用讲话沟通的自闭症学生来教他们沟通。那我不知道你有没有听过这个资讯，就是自闭症的小孩子里面有25到40%是主要不是用口语来沟通的。对，那所以呢，有时候我们太过专注在那边呢，有可能就是失去了让他们 就是找到他真的沟通最有效的方法。所以这一点我想要就是跟你分享一下。我们有时候语言治疗师也不一定是把很多注意力是放在讲话这一方面。那我放了一个这个 YouTube，我住在 Berkeley， 我在旧金山教书。那 UC Berkeley 呢，去年刚毕业2个学士学生，2个都是有自闭症的学生，2个都几乎完全不会讲话。那其中一个呢，那个 Hari Srinivasan， 他现在在 Vanderbilt 在念 PhD， 是念这个心理学的，他还是不会讲话。所以我们如果说，就是说不一定要走那条路，我们如果放宽一点的话，可能有更多的对，开出更多条路。我想人家你的孩子，你的孙子现在12岁了，是吗？
对，他以前小时候他都是用那个 machine，
嗯
point out 什么什么什么，可是怎么搞的？到了初中以后，我就没有看到他们拿 machine 回来过。然后呢，他会听我们知道我们要讲什么，但是他没有办法表达出来。所以呢，变成就是我们在讲话，他听，他做 action。那我就指的这个 language 以前是有一个像 computer 一样，可以讲说 I want this，I 怎么样怎么突然之间也都没有了。那因为我女儿她们工作很忙，那我自己也有工作，所以呢，我就这个就变成这个 connection 就不见了。那我现在年底就要退休了，我想再继续帮我的孙子，但是我怎么回去帮助我的孙子？这就是我想知道的。应该从哪个方向发展？假如你说 OK， 他们不一定需要 talk， 那它是什么 community language community 的那个 tool 是什么？那我要去哪里开始？哪里去找这个 resource？ 这个哪个地方？那我想，你既然是一个 professor 又是 special， 也应该知道很多的那个 resource 哈。那我们是住在马里兰，那我们要怎么样开始去